All right, bars open for business. We are no longer regressing. We're progressing. April's back. She is our anchor, our sail, our rudder to keep this conversation on
That's a
path.
lot of weight on me. You're all of these things.
I mean, so now if we don't, it's your fault.
If it's disorganized, it's all April's fault.
I'm the anchor and the sail, so I'm stopping us from moving and pushing us forward.
Well, yeah. I didn't say at the same time.
Somehow?
Pretty much you're all of it, and we're just gonna make some comments, Drake and I. So
when we put the jib up too early and the ship's like leaning over, and you're like, whoa, let's take a look at the bay first before we go out into the open waters. We'll thank you for that later. But yeah, the crew is back. Here we go. I got my beverage. It's coffee with a little bit of Beggar's Canyon. It looks gross on the rim.
It does look gross, but
I do wash this mug. You know, there are some people that
occasionally,
that are very superstitious about their like coffee mugs, and they will use one mug for their entire lives, and they'll rarely ever wash it.
Oh, that is.
I only use one mug. I only have one mug that I like.
Yeah,
but it gets washed once a day.
Oh yeah, so there's kind of both camps. Like some people will use one mug, and then some people will use one mug and never wash it. I actually collect mugs. I use a different mug every day.
What do they figure? The coffee is so hot it's not going to do anything, or it kills bacteria anyway, or what?
No, I think it's more like it represents their hardworking personality. You know, their coffee
I like
mug
the
is
buildup.
Like
it adds, some kind of flavor to it to have the buildup.
Salmonella really tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or it's like the baseball team, that's on a winning streak that
you don't want to change your socks.
Don't change your underwear. Socks. Yeah. So
yeah.
Well, to say this has been washed. It's just this is like my fourth cup today. So but it's appropriate. We're at a bar talking about theology. So have your drinks, pull up a chair, get comfortable. Topic today is communion, the Eucharist. We're going to have a different variety of things we're going to talk about. I think the soul of it, though, is, what is it and how is Christ a part of it and how are we a part of Christ in it? I don't think we need to go into, where is it instituted? It's clearly instituted, obviously, in the Synoptics. And we see Paul talk about it in Corinthians as something that he was given by Christ, that he is giving to the churches that he's planting. So the other apostles are also instituting this meal as part of the early church as churches are growing and whatnot. So the foundation for this is clearly in the Synoptics and in Scripture. So we're not really going to talk about that. What we're going to talk about mainly is the different views of it and what it's doing. So before we begin, though, I want to just do a kind of a thought experiment. So this is a quote from Irenaeus, Apostolic Father, which means that he probably knew the apostles, at least some of them, John particularly. Okay.
Well, yeah, no, but
yeah, no. What
he knew Polycarp who heard
whatever.
John once or a couple.
A friend of my friend is somebody I actually met before. All right.
6 degrees of separation.
Thank you. Okay. Here's Irenaeus, and here's a quote on his treatise against heresies about the Eucharist or about communion. We offer to him, Christ, the things that are his own, consistently announcing and confessing the fellowship and unity of flesh and spirit. For as the bread taken from the earth, when it has received its consecration from God, is no longer common bread, but is the Eucharist, which consists of two realities, earthly and heavenly. So also our bodies, when they receive the Eucharist, are no longer corruptible, but have the hope of resurrection into eternal life. Now, that quote is going to be taken by both sides that we're going to discuss today and just unequivocally confirming their argument or supporting their argument. But I just want to show that there is a lot of presuppositions that we've just put on that quote, which don't belong there. We've read things like change and partaking and not common, right? And we've already built our structures of what communion is doing for us. So I want you to just realize that as we talk about these things and maybe put those aside and think and say like, okay, what is actually Scripture saying about communion? what is the church believed about it liturgically? Meaning, outside of doctrinal development of communion, which really didn't come about until like the 9th century with Bertramnus, Gottschalk, and Ruffinius, I think is the opponent of the dialectic, and obviously into the Reformation. Before then, liturgically, how did the church understand what was happening with bread and wine and food in the body? So I just wanted to start there, and then I'm going to just briefly list out the different views of communion, and then I'll hand it over to you guys as we expand this out. So the things that we will probably talk about, either dabble in or expand on, is the view of transubstantiation of the Eucharist, meaning that the bread and wine, while they look like bread and wine, in their essence are transformed into the body and the blood of Christ. It is a Aristotelian idea that the material is also part of the immaterial. So it actually will be, or it does turn into the body and blood. We have consubstantiation, which is Luther's rebuttal to that, which is it doesn't, in essence, change, but there is a consubstantiation, or something that is alongside it. So Christ is alongside the bread, above the bread. It's not changing in essence to anything, but Christ is a part of it in some really mystical way that can't really be defined, really, even in the bread and wine itself. It's
Christ's body, you mean?
What did I say?
When you say Christ, you mean Christ's body, right?
Christ's body, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last view, which is probably the most, I would say, ironically, the most misunderstood view, would be the memorialist view, or what's mainly called the Zwinglian view, which came downstream of the Reformation as well. And it was the view that him and Luther separated fellowship over. Well, Luther more than Zwingli. Zwingli didn't care. But so those are the three views that we're probably going to touch on. But the core of it's going to be, what is communion doing? So go ahead.
So the fourth one, because there's actually four.
Oh,
the real presence view.
So the real presence.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah. So real presence is the idea that the body is really present, but not, but not like locally and carnally. But that in some way it is still the actual body of Jesus that you're eating. So almost spiritually, the body is spiritually there, if you want to say it that way.
It's almost like a blend of transubstantiation and consubstantiation.
Yeah, but like through a spiritual way, so you're not really eating, like you're feasting on Christ's body, but not actually. This is the problem with all these views. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So branching off from these four views, right? What do we see the Bible as actually teaching of what communion is doing for us, and what it is?
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier, and how, I feel like when you need to add all of these philosophical explanations and it becomes complicated to where you yourself don't even understand what you're talking about anymore, or you have to assign some sort of foreign philosophical system to it in order for it to make sense, that you've already gone into ground that the Bible would probably say is more, either it's secret and hasn't been revealed to you, or you're adding something to the text that makes it different than what the text would say it was. So in this case, I would actually argue, what do we actually have from the Bible? If you just had the Bible and nothing else, no other tradition.
Well, and I was going to say, even though I read Irenaeus, and there isn't any formative doctrinal statement that you can read about the Eucharist for 800 years.
Yeah.
When you read Origen and stuff talking about communion, you do see the aspects of taking philosophical beliefs and then inserting them into these ideas of communion. Origen over spiritualizing everything almost to a Gnostic extent, where he even calls like the bread, he uses the Greek term haartos, episusios, super substantial bread, right? So like, and he's talking not about the Eucharist, he's talking about the Lord's Prayer. So like you see these philosophical bends inserting themselves into what is instituted in the church, even though liturgically they're not acting that kind of Gnostic idea out. It's physical, it's present,
Right.
it's doing something to the body. But you do see that creeping in of these philosophical bents into communion. So there is a precedent in church history of that already happening, even though there's no doctrinal statement saying this is what the church believes.
Yeah.
It's more helpful to go back like liturgically. What were they actually performing in the early church as really an example of what they probably actually believed about it?
Well, I do think we do need to be careful as well with the church fathers. I think people ultimately think they're like blank slates, and then they were just taught all the apostolic doctrine, and they have it or whatever. But they believe all sorts of things that are like Irenaeus thought Jesus was 50 years old during his ministry.
Yeah,
but Luke clearly says that he wasn't. So stuff like that, and I don't know if it's Irenaeus or it could be Augustine, it could be both of them, but they actually believe like the phoenix is a real
that
bird.
was Clement of Rome.
Clement? Okay, thanks.
In his letter.
Wait, it's not.
Yeah,
it's not a real.
No, it is.
I
They
wish
just
it
haven't found
was.
it yet.
It'd be awesome, but no,
Yeah.
it isn't. So like it's not as though these men, they would know for a fact of what's true about the Bible. They're like any other group of men.
Mm.
Now, yes, they speak Greek, so they have kind of an upper hand, but even Greek is transitioning, and they're Gentiles in different areas. They don't speak Second Temple Jewish Koine Greek, and they're not familiar with those concepts as much, other than them reading Second Temple Jewish texts, maybe understanding the background a little bit better than your modern evangelical might or something. But it's really important to understand, like, they're trying to figure out what the Bible's saying too. And sometimes they're right, and sometimes they're not. And we would argue that I think God holds orthodoxy together through the church, regardless of their disunity, maybe in other ideas or whatever. But in terms of what we would say is orthodox in terms of who God is and the means to know God through the gospel, and then of course orthopraxy with sexual morality and whatnot, and they would actually have that down to be his people. But other than that, they're trying to figure it out too. And so some of it, like I'm always interested to know what the fathers believed, and it's it's interesting. But at the end of the day, I don't really care as much as what does the scripture say. And again, coming back to the question that if we didn't have any of that, if we had if we were the fathers and we just received the Bible as it was, knowing that traditions start even early, because you can have traditions starting early on or whatever that are off of beliefs that people have that are wrong. Or we see that obviously Paul's correcting the churches in his letters. That's the whole point, because they have actually misunderstood and they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing and whatnot. If we just had the Bible, what would we come up with? Understanding its language and whatnot. So just through exegesis alone, what would we conclude about communion?
I guess can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions is, like, can we take this one step farther back and say, you had this institution of the Lord's Supper at the Last Supper. And so I guess, how does the fact that Jesus is physically present there, he hasn't been crucified yet, he hasn't resurrected, and this is, how he's participating in communion with his disciples, how does that affect the different views that we have now, or does it, or should it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because ultimately he doesn't have a spiritual body then, and that's when he says, "This is my body." So in what way is this his body? If his body's right here and he doesn't have a spiritual body, and he can't connect to this bread in some way to where it's his body, literally.
Yeah.
And so that I think what you just asked is the question exegetically you need to ask, and then say, well, if he can't really connect, then it's metaphorical. Like I just think it's obvious. It's metaphorical then. Obviously, it's not literally his body, because it can't be, because he's a human. Otherwise, and this is where Drake and I were kind of talking about this earlier, and Craig mentions, the idea that Jesus is like docetic, so it's really like a spirit thing.
Mhm.
Like the body actually is reaching out, in a spiritual way. And it's like Jesus is fully human. He has to be fully human, and he's not just fully human on the earth, he's still fully human. And this is very important because humans, they don't stretch out and become, like one thing with like other objects or whatever. They're not like that. That's not a part of them. Again, unless you're talking about federally, and we were kind of talking about this earlier in terms of you're talking about like the bread is federally Jesus's body because he owns it and it's a part of him and all of that communion. Then it's like, oh, okay, well, that's fine. But that's not, you're not no longer talking about his like literal physical body then, because his literal physical body cannot be that thing.
So people, to April's question, I think there's a problem because people will take the Passover as just the meal portion. Like it's just, Passover is just that's the Eucharist. It's just the bread. And, even Paul says that, right? It's just the bread and there's nothing before or after. And I'm like, hold on. The Passover is the whole Jesus bringing his disciples up to this room. What happens before and what happens after is a part of the metaphor.
Right.
Because then, right, the question is like, what is the metaphor then? In John, he starts with washing the disciples' feet. It's saying like, look, I am the master, I am the king, and I am your servant. Therefore, be like this to one another. Wash each other's feet. And then you have the Passover. And then you have the high priestly prayer. And then you have Jesus saying, hey, look, it's better for me to leave because when I leave, I'm going to send you the helper, and the helper is going to glorify me. He's going to say my words. And he's going to lift you. Right. So like there's all these connections, and it almost takes the metaphor of the bread and the wine being, it is what I'm giving over to you, apostles, to take my word, gather the people around that, which is, we're going to get to that with Zwingli's view, right?
Yeah.
Bring it around that, right? And around that, you're going to eat. You're going to make sure no one goes hungry. You're going to wash each other's feet. That is the Passover. Like that entire narrative. It's not just when they sit down at the table. That might be the apex of the metaphor, but it's not it. Because then the metaphor would fall flat if you don't if it's not full. Metaphors aren't vibrant because they're flat. They're vibrant because they give my mind an entire picture of a symbolic truth. The horizon is is like I don't know. That's more of a simile, but the harvest of the horizon or something like that. It's like, I had this view of this beautiful harvest, and the horizon is something I have to reap, and So it's like many facets. So it's all built off that. And I think when we miss the totality of the Passover, then we do reduce it, and then it's no longer a metaphor. It's got to be something. Well, it's got to be the bread and the wine. That's it. And it has to be bread and wine. It can't be water. It can't be anything else.
Right.
It's got to be those literal elements, because that's what's consecrated.
Well, and the reduction is coming not even just now with the elements. It's the elements are getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Well, yeah, that too. Yeah.
Right.
So the elements are actually shrinking. It's like we went from a supper to a snack to a little amuse-bouche. Like it's just, what are we gonna have? We're just gonna waft the wine eventually, just get a sniff of it. Like everything's just shrinking.
Well, and it, like, if you look in the Old Testament, the Passover expands into all the sacrifices, right? So it doesn't get smaller, it gets bigger.
It's bigger.
To where like now, and what are the sacrifices? What do you do? Well, there are different aspects of the sacrifices that are meant to basically show you what the Passover was supposed to be. And ultimately what communion of Christ is that there is an element to where, well, the sacrifices, it covers your sin. And that's one message that God wants to convey. It takes away your uncleanliness. But then there's the sacrifice where you sit down with the priest who represents God and you eat it with the priest. And there's communion between you, and that represents you, actually having a feast with God and the sacrifice itself. And so I think that what Jesus is saying with "this is my body" is that rather than feasting on the sacrifice, the Passover that you would normally feast on, this bread will represent you feasting on my body, because obviously you're not cannibals and I'm not telling you to feast on my actual body, which is what the Jews misunderstood him as saying. And instead, this bread and wine will represent my body, the feast, but it will still have all that stuff and all that meaning that all the sacrifices in Passover had, which is you'll be communing with God, you'll be communing with me, you'll be becoming one with me. I'll be cleansing you of all your sin. I'll be reconciling you together in community and all of that. Like it's all of that together. And instead, and it'll fill the poor and it'll fill the hungry, and this is going to be, it's the shalom that it will bring. It brings in all of this or whatever, in harmony with God and man. And instead it is, here, eat a cracker, and you can be forgiven for thinking about Mary in a way that you shouldn't have last week. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, that's part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And the problem is now it's been reduced to such an individualism that I was talking to Drake how, like, if you go to an EO church or a Roman Catholic church, and frankly, even Protestant churches, it's just this individual thing. Even though it's cold, no one really knows each other or talks to one another. It's just about you and God, and you taking your cracker and wine, and now you can know that you're forgiven in some way, and people not even realizing what communion might be. And it distorts what it really is. And I asked the question of Drake earlier, like, has the church really been practicing communion in the way that Christ has commanded for centuries? Because it's just become this individual thing, even in a time of the Middle Ages.
Yeah, the irony is it's called communion, and then there's a complete divorce from any kind of fellowship.
Well, see, they don't call it, in the Middle Ages, they don't call it communion, though. They call it
Right.
the Eucharist.
So there's thankfulness.
So it's an individual thankfulness for
Yeah.
what God has done
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Well, the original question being, what is Christ doing when he says these things with these elements, right? And then let's expand that to what the apostles, as they've understood that to mean.
Yeah.
And the biggest answer to that understanding of what it means is Paul's letter to the Corinthians. That's probably the most explicit.
Yeah.
It's the most explicit. So we understand that Christ isn't emphasizing the elements themselves, because we look at all the things that the Corinth church was doing wrong. I doubt they were getting the actual elements wrong. Like they Paul doesn't say, you're serving fish and, goat's milk, and Christ didn't consecrate those. You see, like, the things that they were screwing up is, one, they weren't communing. They weren't together properly. They were abusing one another. The rich were eating before the poor could get there. The slaves that were doing their master's bidding in the early morning, and they were drinking much more than they ought, and getting drunk. Yeah. And it no longer became, again, that full picture of the Passover, of washing the feet, giving the word, and then making sure nobody goes hungry, and then lifting up your living sacrifice to God and what you're doing for one another. It now became the devil's world, where you're all succubuses. You're sucking one another's life out of each other.
Yeah.
And then people are dying. And the irony is, you're sucking each other's life, and then God's actually sucking your life out for doing that. People are dying. You're getting sick because you're actually taking what Christ has said about feasting on his body and then feasting on one another in a destructive way.
Yeah.
And so we see, like, there is not this individualistic idea of communion where it's just about you giving up, giving your sacrifice back to God in the bread and the wine or something. It is the lack of communion that starts this whole thing. And so you see, like, the metaphorical understanding of the Passover in those rebukes, not the literal stuff that we do today or think of it today.
Craig backs up a little bit further before that in like 10, and he's talking, and because 8 through 9, Paul's just been saying, should you eat meat sacrificed to idols and all that sort of thing or whatever. And Paul makes this statement that, like, don't you know that, if you eat meat in the actual temple, in the actual worship of these gods, that you're actually like participating in the worship of demons. And his point isn't, and Craig points this out to Gavin, I think, in their conversation. The point isn't you're ingesting demons.
Right.
Like, that's not the point. The point is you're participating in the worship and becoming one with the group that's worshiping them, and one with the demons that are, when you worship them or whatever. And that's the idea. And then he presents, that's don't you realize that that's what you're doing with communion? You're worshiping Christ, becoming one with one another, and having a unification with Christ. And that's what's actually happening there, because it's worship. And what is the means of that worship? Well, every time it's described by Jesus or Paul, Jesus says, do this. Why? Because it's a sacrifice for you that will cleanse you of your sins when you eat it, because you're eating my body. It's like, no, he says, do this in remembrance of me. That is, it's a proclamation of me. And what does Paul say? Why do we do this? Well, because those who eat and drink it proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. It's a proclamation of the gospel. And it's a proclamation that helps Christians persevere through communing with Christ and communing with one another through the person and work of Jesus Christ, the gospel. And I think that gets caricatured as though it's just, oh, well, yeah, remember Jesus? Yeah, remember that guy? Whatever happened to him? It's like, no. It's remembering that Jesus is with you through the Spirit, that he walks among you through angels and the Spirit, and that he will never forsake you or leave you. He'll be with you till the end of the age, and he's there with you to forgive you of your sins when you confess them. He's there with you to intercede for you between you and the Father. He's there with you to the end. That's the idea, is that in communion helps you to remember, I'm with you. I'm still with you. I'll remain with you all the way to the end. Don't be afraid, and don't be discouraged, and don't be overwhelmed. I'm with you to the end. That's the whole point. That's what memorial is meaning. It doesn't mean, oh yeah, that Jesus guy, I remember him. That's not what memorial is about. And so, but this is the picture that you get from Scripture. You don't get stuff like, well, in an Aristotelian system, the substance and accidents. It's like, what? It's like, you don't get that from it's just literally saying that Jesus is with you. But then we see, how is he with us if he's got a physical body? Well, is he physically here? And the answer is no, he's not physically here. He's here through the Spirit. He walks among the lampstands through angels. That's what you see in Revelation. So it's an angel John's talking to, and yet he's talking to Jesus. Well, how is that? How is he seeing Jesus and talking to an angel and seeing an angel? And it's like, because it's through the angel. It's through the Spirit that John's getting this stuff. That's the idea. He can appear in a vision to Paul, but is he physically present with us? And I would say, well, no, he hasn't physically returned. He's spiritually present with us, and that's what the communion reminds us of, to persevere. And so in that regard, it goes to, we'll talk about the sacraments in general maybe, and that'll be helpful. But yeah, go ahead, April.
This is a part of why, like, asking the right questions is really important, because when the question is, what are the elements and how is Jesus connected to the elements and all those types of things, I think that you stray into a lot of speculation and a lot of these kind of philosophical meanderings, because the real questions should be, what does it look like to remember Christ? What does it look like to proclaim the gospel? Like, what does that actually look like in communion? Not, how is Jesus connected to the wine in this very particular way? And I need to understand the mechanics of it. That has not been revealed to us. And so that isn't the ultimate question that we should be asking to be faithful to these commands.
Yeah. And, it ends up being like, well, if it's not grape juice, then the magic doesn't happen. And it's like, what are you talking about? It has nothing to do. Like the reason why, and I've said this over and over again, the reason why it's wine is because wine is red like blood. The reason why it's bread is because bread looks like flesh or whatever, and it's cheaper than meat. And you can actually have more of it than meat. And so God's actually, again, thinking of the poor and the people he's saving by having it as bread instead of meat. Otherwise, man, we'd be all impoverished just trying to get the communion done. And so, like, that's why it's those elements. But you know what? You know what also looks like blood? Grape juice. It doesn't matter.
Or Kool-Aid.
Or Kool-Aid for that matter. It's about the remembrance, the representation of what it represents in remembering what Jesus did. If whatever you're using helps you to remember what Jesus did and that he's with you and then all of that in his presence, then great. It doesn't matter. Maybe you can't afford wine. That's fine. You can still partake in communion.
I do find it interesting that we try to develop doctrines of communion and the parts of the story where everybody, the disciples, I mean, are confused about what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. They're like, what is happening? Peter's like, you're not going to wash my feet. He's like, you're not going to have any part of me. So the disciples like, what do you mean? There's no understanding of body. So when he says, this is my body, they're like, what?
Well, he literally says to them, I have bread that you don't know of. And they're like, bread? Who gave him bread? Did you bring bread? Right. I'm hungry. Yeah. And it's like, what do you say? It's not talking about that.
Yeah. So we build these doctrinal systems off of the veiled language.
Yeah.
And then when later the body of Christ is actually revealed to be the people, like the presence of Christ is actually the body, is the church.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's what feasting on the body means. It means like, how is, like you said, like the memorial, our idea of memorial is the Vietnam Memorial. It's a stationary object that I go to and say, oh, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's how we view the Eucharist. It's a pretty memorial that we go to. We walk to once a week and we say, thank you for going to, thank you for going to the Da Nang and doing what you did for me or whatever. No, that's not what Christ has given us. It's not that. When you realize like the reminder or the memorial of Christ saying, I remember you, I'm going to come for you, is the representative of him who is another church member giving me food.
You know what it is? It allows Pharisees and people in a Pharisaical mindset to be really careful about the physical elements. And we don't, you know what? Maybe children shouldn't even take this because they might drop Jesus on the floor. And it's let's have this in a separate. This is Zwingli's big point. It's like, let's have it on an altar. And let's separate it from the people. So where the priest has to turn his back to the people. And it's like, that's the opposite of what communion is. What do you mean turn his back? He should be eating with them at the same table and he can just administer it. But it's not a matter of like him separating it from the people. It's ridiculous to where now only the priest will drink the blood in case anyone might spill it. And it's like, now you've completely misunderstood. It allows people to treat it really sacredly and then treat Christians like garbage because, well, they're not really... it doesn't matter. I can like wreck a church and split it up or whatever. But man, let's have goblets
with your name on
communion,
with your name
made
on
of gold with your name. I mean, it's just like ridiculous.
It's almost like they've turned it into a dead idol. Like they've made communion instead of a catalyst to serve the living body of Christ. It's another golden calf.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to clean the communion plate than your heart. So that's the problem.
We need to quote that. It's easier to clean your communion plate than your heart. That's a good one.
And so, so I just think it's interesting how we try to replace the real thing, the substance, with the ritual. And it's like, I'm sorry, we're not in the old covenant anymore. That was bad for them to do in the old covenant. And now we're trying to do it again with our new rituals. And all the rituals are trying to say is Jesus has saved you. Jesus is with you. He's still saving you. Jesus is going to complete the salvation. So hang on, people. Like, don't get weary. Don't give up.
And just to circle back, April, did you want to say something? To circle back on the church fathers argument, because I know that, going back to them as the source is not how you're going to develop the proper doctrine of the Eucharist. But I do want to say that how they were experiencing liturgically communion was what we're describing. The language that Irenaeus is using and Ignatius is using, these are all terms that they can freely use when it's connected to the actual purpose of this quote unquote sacrament, this Eucharist. So like when we read in, for example, Pliny the Younger's letter to Trajan, and he's describing what these slave women are doing. They meet on a fixed day, and after they meet, they go home, and then they come back and do what? They eat, right? They eat. Yeah. Like, come on, guys. Like, it is so clear. Like, you can take these statements and rip them at its liturgical context and say, well, see, yep, the church fathers believe that it's literally the body, and it's turning into something, and it's giving you immortality, and da 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 da. It's like, well, of course they're using that language because that's what they have to try to bring in and to affect the individual who's partaking of this communal meal together. Once you divorce the liturgical action from the sentence or the doctrinal statement, then you just have insanity. Then you have you have evolution, and Gavin's favorite word, accretions, to something that is unrecognizable to what was given to us, which was given to Paul, which Paul gave to others, which the other apostles gave to the other churches.
Yeah. Would we say that the communion is transforming you? Of course we would, because it's the gospel and fellowship of the saints. And so, of course, it's transforming you. Of course, Jesus is in it, transforming you in that sense. Yeah. Like, yeah. Of course, it's then, and is the bread his body? Yeah, the bread is his body. Now, in what way is it his body? Is it metaphorically his body? Then yeah. It's not literally his body. Like I just, that whole conversation between Luther and Zwingli is ridiculous. Where Luther's just, this is my body. It's like, I would just sit there and every time he said, this is my body, I'd be like, I am the door.
Yeah, I am the door. It's like,
yeah.
Like, is he somehow the door? Is he like, well, it looks like a door on the outside, but inside it's Jesus's body. It's like, no, dude, it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Like, it's just unbelievable to me. Again, it's almost like fundamentalism throughout Christian history, to where it's just overly literalizing something that the language itself and the context of that language would not cause you to make it literal. Like, as going back to April's original question, if Jesus is standing right there and you can see his body, and then he holds up bread and some wine, he's like, this is my body. And this is and by the way, he also says this is the cup of the new covenant. It's like,
so it's not even the wine.
It's the cup. Man, somebody find the Holy Grail or none of us is going to be saved. It's like, no, dude, it's metaphorical language. That's a synecdoche. Like, the cup represents the blood in it, and it's part of the whole thing that represents Jesus's death. Like, obviously he's speaking metaphorically. Here's a man who, and you pointed this out, Drake, throughout his life has used almost nothing but metaphor. He's literally, like, over and over again has been like, yeah, you know what? Let me give you this parable, and let me talk about myself in terms of bread and doors and a shepherd and, all and a road. And it's like, oh man, how can Jesus literally? No, he's not taught. We see throughout the Gospels, whenever they take him literally, they have him wrong.
Yeah.
They've misunderstood what he said. And here he is, this is my body. And what does the church do? Oh, it's his literal body. It's like, no, dude, come on. And I think the biggest way to point this out is, I think that Protestants are wrong in how many sacraments there are. I don't think there are 2. I think there are 3.
3. Yeah.
And I think that if you understand the nature of the third, the easiest to understand is the nature of the third. The third one is marriage. And this is what John does. I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere and be like, oh, I want marriage to be a sacrament. Like, John uses, literally at the beginning of his gospel, he's got Jesus turning the water into wine at a wedding feast.
Yeah.
So you've got all three there. And then throughout the Gospel of John, you've got water representing regeneration in baptism. You've got the bread and the wine, the communion, representing the continual, the continual message of Christ's sacrifice being applied to his people and changing them and bring them to maturity. And then you've got the message of the marriage and to where Christ is the bridegroom who's going to come back for his bride, which represents glorification. So they each show stages of salvation. They represent those stages. Now you could say, oh, well, I think baptism actually regenerates people. And there are people who believe that. And you can say, oh, well, I think communion actually cleanses you of your sin. And there are people who believe that. So they actually take the physical thing and think the physical thing is actually cleansing them. But no one in the history of the church or who had half a brain would ever say marriage glorifies you and makes your body incorruptible and immortal. It doesn't. That's clearly not happening. So marriage doesn't do that. So clearly then marriage is just a metaphor that represents the thing. It doesn't do the thing.
I think that's a really good point. And I want to may extend that. And I'm just thinking of Hebrews, what we just went over on Sunday in Hebrews, at the end of Hebrews 6, where God is doing a living metaphor with Abraham and calling Isaac to the altar. There's like a living metaphor there.
Yep.
And the metaphor ends up becoming an oath at the end. Hey, I can't even go against my own word, so nothing's going to fail that I say.
Yeah.
And then when you like transport that to the future and you look at the new covenant and you see these things, you call them sacraments, whatever, but you almost view them as like, these are the oaths. These are the metaphorical oaths that God has condescended to us to remind us that nothing is going to thwart what he's done and said and promised and given.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, then you think about marriage in particular. Marriage is like the oath of oaths, right? For your it is the covenant that it cannot be broken. That's what it's supposed to picture, right? It is bounding yourself to another, to the exception of all others.
Yeah, just to put this in there, what it conveys is our permanent union with Jesus. So if you don't have a permanence view of marriage, it doesn't really fit.
Yeah.
Well, or whatever, just to slide that one in there. If you actually believe, what some people say are the Westminster idea, then ultimately you don't have that idea. But again, if that's true of the final sacrament, then that tells us, okay, that's the way the sacraments are being used. Yeah. So baptism doesn't regenerate you. It represents that you've been regenerated, and now you're proclaiming that in faith by committing yourself to Christ through the church. Communion doesn't do the thing that actually forgives you and cleanses you. It represents the gospel that has and does continually forgive you of your sins. And then marriage, of course, then represents the permanent union that you'll have with Jesus Christ, to where you become incorruptible and immortal.
Let me go back. I don't want to defer too much over to the just sacramental like theology, like period. But as far as like communion is concerned, we've kind of addressed like transubstantiation is oversimplification of what Christ has said. Consubstantiation is a even further reduction, probably.
Yeah.
We kind of addressed the memorial view a little bit as far as like Zwingli is concerned, and then like the royal presence, and kind of if people like maybe have put this together, but kind of combine those two, and the combination is what which is the combination is what Zwingli was actually bringing forth or promoting. But before we go, like maybe expand that a little bit more, this idea that communion turned into like a sacrifice to God, rather than it being something that God has given us. Let's talk about that a little bit. Like, how are we to do that?
I do think it is interesting how it ends up getting switched. And I think a lot of reformers will try to make this, and even Luther himself, I think, says this, is that this is not us presenting a sacrifice to God. It's God presenting what he has done through Christ for us. So it's for us. And it's presented to us, again, why? Because it proclaims what he did. And so it's the gospel that he's presenting before us. But then we might have the effects of it, which is reconciliation to him and reconciliation to one another in communion. One conveys what God has done for the community, and so it's more corporate. Obviously, individuals included in that, but it's more corporate. The other then works toward, well, if this is something I have to present to God for my sins, it becomes an individual thing, even though you might say it's still corporate in a way, but you're really thinking in terms of, oh, I must do this and partake in this in order to be forgiven. And so whenever I said this last night too, whenever you're trying to be saved, it's going to become an individual thing. Yeah. Whenever you realize you've already been saved, now you can look out toward God and other people. And that to me is part of the problem. This is why that view went hand in hand with the idea that now I'm saved by my works and what I do and how many sacraments I take care of or to participate in and all that. Because that all then makes it an individual focus rather than a more corporate one.
It's interesting because like the views that we've listed are downstream of viewing or manipulating communion into a sacrifice given back to God.
Yeah.
And that is a very early accretion. That is this is our Western minds. This is what happens when you actually save a bunch of pagans and they haven't been sanctified out of their sacrificial system, their cultists, right. And they kind of bring that over a little bit and those ideas. And you can't blame them for that. I mean, that's just, that's the time they grew up in. Not grew up. That sounds like a little kid. A time they were in and things they had to deal with and struggle and think through and all that.
It's their shared experience with.
Yeah, it's their shared experience. But like when we realize that this is something that God has given us, going back to the oath idea, and this being in a sense part of the holistic view of sacrifice that Paul gives us, as far as our lives are concerned, we can say in one way this is part of us bringing our lives as a living sacrifice for one another. And because making food is a sacrifice. Maybe you don't get to eat all that meat that week because you've bought it all for the church. They become sacrifices. I spent a bunch of money on a bunch of wine so people can have beverages or all that stuff. Yeah. And then it becomes part of the sacrifice. But we mistake that and then intermix it with the actual act and saying we're giving that back to God. And it's like, well, no, we're only doing this because God gave it to us. Like, hold on, the fact that we're doing this is us receiving it. You can't give it back. It's already been given. What you can give back is the holistic idea of your life, and that is rejecting your dreams, your aspirations of the old man, and then saying, I will now be whatever I need to be for the body, whether it is going to my death, whether it is dying an old man in the church, whatever it may be. But my life is God's now. It's not mine.
Well, again, it's just funny because what is the sacrifice that we give back? It's like, well, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. And give him sacrifices of praise. And it's like, again, but that's really hard. So
this is easier.
I'd rather just give you this bread and wine because that's so much easier. And it's like, and that's what pagans do. They replace, the actual dedication of their lives to God with, giving him money or rituals or something like that.
Okay. I want to go. We've talked about that a little bit. Going back to the idea of a proper Zwinglian view. Here's a truncated Zwinglian view of the Eucharist. It is that Vietnam memorial. It is just something we go to, we look to, and say thank you. We got to feel really bad about ourselves, and dress in black, sing a dirge, and go home silent. It's like every Sunday's a Maundy Thursday or something.
That's like a modern Baptist view, I'd say.
Yeah, which
I mean, that's how it is when you go to Pearl Harbor. They won't even let you speak when you get off the boat and you're going
really?
to the memorial.
You can't
they
talk?
won't let you speak.
Oh,
No.
wow.
You're supposed to just be quiet the whole time.
Yeah.
Until you get back on the boat.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because every festival in the Bible that has food is a celebration.
Joyful. Yeah, it's joyful.
Not a time of mourning. Mourning means you fast.
Yeah.
You don't have a feast. You don't have a meal.
Meal
is celebration. That's why you're even allowed to like get a little, hey, you know what? If you want the harder liquor in this particular celebration, you can have it. But not normally, but in this particular one, you can, because it's a celebration. And that's what communion is supposed to be. This is why I used to get on everybody for like, why are we singing dirges during communion? It's literally Jesus has saved your lives. Hooray! It's the end of Return of the Jedi. It's the Ewoks jumping up and down. It's like, yay, Kuknak-chaka. Like, it's like that whole. It's like everyone
2 quotes
is
in this podcast now.
That just
Alexander, do your magic.
Yay, Kuknak-chaka. Like, but you know what I mean? It's like this is a celebratory time because it's like, again, Jesus is saying, I'm here. I haven't left you as orphans. I'm still with you. I've given you the Spirit. I know what's going on. I know what's going on in your life. I know what you're struggling with. I know what you're doing. I'm here to help you still. I'm with you to the end. Like that is like, oh, praise God. Yay. It's just that part where like, the darkness is like coming in on you and all of a sudden the hero walks in the room and you realize he's there. He's present. It's like, oh, well, now the darkness is going to get its butt kicked. And it's like, it's that thing. And so it's not like, it reminds me of the Life of Brian thing where they're like, oh, and they're like smacking themselves, on the back of the head or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just like, come on.
There's something interesting, like Zwingli's view, like the accurate version is it all begins with an invitation. Like he accelerates his doctrinal views from an invitation from God, and he couches it in Matthew 11, where Christ says, "Come to me, all who are weary, heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And what he's going to do with that is he's going to say, okay, well, it's the mass is the antithesis of actual what communion actually is. So it isn't a recapitulation. It isn't the fullest perversion or prostitution of the Eucharist, which I believe the full view of the Mass is actually the full prostitution of it. Rather, it is actually the living word, because that statement isn't dead. Christ's words aren't dead. Much like when Luke blows up the Death Star and you hear Obi-Wan's voice, the Force is with you always. And you are with Luke and like, yeah, Obi-Wan's with me through his words. Right? Yeah. You can hear him or whatever. That means he's alive. So like there's this aliveness and this partaking through the active, alive word of Christ, because he's actually at the right hand of the Father physically, not present with us. So like he's initiating his memorial view from a living word that garners a reaction from you. Come and gather now, right? Here's like the church gathering. So then it starts with the word, then it becomes the people gathered. And then it's the people listening to that invitation, and the application of the invitation is then, and Zwingli will leave it with the bread and the wine. But he's going to say like this is the participatory aspect of the living word that is with us now.
Yeah.
There's probably some stuff I'm missing there, but that's the real memorial view.
Yeah, the real memorial view is just much more holistic. I mean, even to the point where he's like, we are partaking of Christ. He
Yeah.
just doesn't mean you're eating his body, but like you are really actually, you look, the gospel is unifying us. Jesus telling us he's there with us is unifying. It increases devotion in everyone. It increases love in the community, not only for Jesus, but for everyone else. If we know Jesus is with us and Jesus loves you and Jesus loves me, we're going to treat each other a whole lot differently.
Yep.
When we've just received all this love and salvation and forgiveness and all, like, so it does something to us. It's not, again, it's not memorial in the sense of like, you remember that guy who died? Yeah, remember him? He's not dead. You just said it. He's alive.
Right.
And I almost feel like so many people treat Jesus as though he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, he's alive. This is a point I try to make with like preaching of the word, right? Jesus is alive, not dead. So I need to speak the word like Jesus, because he's speaking literally through me or through you or whoever's teaching or whatever. He's not dead, and we're remembering what he said and reading it or whatever. Same thing with communion. He's not dead, and we're just like remembering what he did. He literally is alive, and he's interceding for us, and we're remembering that he actually is with us. So we're not alone. We're not by ourselves, and we're not just some community meeting together like a cult because we don't have everybody else. It's literally we're meeting there because Jesus is meeting with us, which then makes it really important because God has called us to the mountain. Jesus is actually standing up and getting ready to teach, and then half the people are like, I don't know, I'm kind of tired, I got better things to do, I don't know if I should really come and show. It's like, what do you mean? Like, literally the best thing that's could possibly ever happen is happening. Like, get there, and it's like, oh well, I can eat a cracker and wine at home, and it's like, yeah, you can, but that's not what it is. Or I can remember what Jesus did at home. It's like, yeah, but that's not what's happening. There's something more happening than that.
Yeah, who throws a one-person party? Like, yay! Like what kind of a party? That's not a party. That's just sad. Everyone's like, oh,
one-person wedding.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So I guess the question is, like, now that we understand that, right? Because those who don't go to our church or haven't watched online may not understand what this looks like practically, because we do have communion, with the little cups, the little shot glasses, and your little, crumb of bread. We do have this on Sunday, but then there's always this explanation of, the fuller picture of this is at the fellowship meal. And so what does this look like practically, and how could the church go about changing its practice to be more obedient to the commands?
Well, I think so. I always view regardless of how small or big it is on Sunday, as the synecdoche. So it's literally how people like break ground, where like one guy, the CEO will come and with a shovel and he'll just like
stick the ribbon.
Yeah, cut the ribbon, or he'll do the first hole.
Yeah.
And throw it, but he's not digging the whole thing. But it represents all the work that's going to be done. That's what communion is to me in the service. It's basically saying this is a tiny part. This is the breaking of the ground for the meal that we're going to have both today and throughout the week with one another. So again, at Bible studies, and we have evensong, or we meet for Third Thursday, or whatever it may be, will be a continuation of the weekly meal that we're going to be having together. So that it's not simply like this cracker. It represents not just the food, but all the fellowship and all the assigning to the teaching of the apostles that we're going to be listening to, which is what they're doing in the book of Acts. That's exactly what the description is, to where they're meeting to eat, break bread, to listen to the apostolic teaching, and to really just fellowship with one another.
So I go back to my conversation with your brother, April, and we were talking about like the purposes of fictional writing and speculative fictional worlds. And it is not to be a world in of itself, but it is to push you to reality, the actual thing. And I do see what we're doing at our church. It is that little aspect of it is a drive to the real thing. It should be like, oh yeah, here's the beginning. And this is the start of the day, the start of this meal, and we're gonna finish it with the actual. So I would like here would be my counsel or advice to other pastors that maybe have felt this or moving this way, or like trying to, how do I implement this in my church without nuking everyone?
With freaking everyone out.
Yeah. And it's gotta be slow. And I don't think anyone is sinning by having like the smaller picture of it. Like, I don't think God is not there because you're doing the thimbles. I would
But
say
you might be
it's just
sinning if that's all
incomplete.
you have.
Yeah, if you have no
well,
fellowship.
if
or
if your church is literally meeting one day on a Sunday and there's nothing else happening, there's a lot more wrong.
There's a reason why, if that's happening, most of those I very rarely see anyone transformed in churches like that, if that's what it looks like, because that's not what it should be. And I just want to communicate, if anyone, look, what we've said today might be really offensive to a lot of traditions and a lot of people that we love and agree with, and whatever, on a lot of other things, but here's my encouragement, or maybe my exhortation: be offended that for so long the minimal amount of communion has been applied in your church. Be offended that it's not wrapped around more loving fellowship and more actually an acknowledgement that Christ is with us and all of that. Like, be more offended at that. I understand at the end of the day, maybe you want to believe communion is something more, that's fine. But like, whatever you do, don't make it less than what we've said.
Yeah.
And I feel like replacing it with, well, I believe it's this or that and all the other thing, has almost made it less in a way. So if you can hold on to whatever your view is and make it as much as we're talking about, then great.
And to Drake's point, like the narrative thrust of this should be pushing us toward what will communion look like in the new heaven and new earth. And it's not going to be you sitting individually in your own little pew, ignoring everyone else, being mournful about Christ's sacrifice. It's going to look like feasting and celebration in the presence of God and perfect fellowship with one another, and recognizing all the wonderful things that God has done for you through the gospel. So we should be pushing towards that, the fullness of that reality, and trying to pull that back into our practice now.
I'm going to be like, April comes and sits down by me, and I'm going to be like, you know what, April, this is my space. And then this is my
I'm trying
pond.
to commune. I'm trying to
planet.
commune with God right now, so leave me alone.
Right. I'm trying to have fellowship by just fishing in my pond.
The pond that will never be finished.
Yeah.
I'll never forget. Like, this was in 2010. I was going to a PCA church, newly reformed, and I had grown pretty close to the pastor there, and I was in his office, and he had a big whiteboard, and he had all this stuff written on it. And I just asked him, like, what are you doing? What is this? And he's like, well, I'm trying to figure out how to make our church more of a community. And at the time, I didn't know what he was on about.
Yeah,
because he just had this. There's this gaping hole in the church, and like, we met on Sundays, but then like nothing really happened after that. There's like little Bible studies, but no one's
common.
Yeah, and I was like, and I didn't know where that desire was coming from, other than he was just trying to be a better, a more personal guy or more personal pastor or something like that. But then I understand, reading church history, I was like, that's what he's seeing, and that's what he's trying to emulate now. Is like, he's seeing there's a fuller version of what they're doing, and he wants to go to that. And it's like, how do you bridge that with the modern gap, and make this a vibrant community? And sometimes, if your church is dying, like, you do have to nuke it. Sorry, you're going to have to probably be pretty extreme pretty quickly. But if you have that foundation of community and you just want to grow it, then this is slow teaching, and then you can implement this stuff over time. But it's vital, because if you want people to grow, Paul makes this point in Ephesians. Part of it's only in communion that people are being sanctified. The fruits of the Spirit only exist in communion. I can't be patient with you if I'm not around you. I can't grow in patience if you're not bugging me.
Yeah.
It's like, I can't self-implement these things.
Yeah, you can't speak truth in love. You can't sing spiritual songs to one another. You can't do any of that if
Yeah.
you're.
It is interesting. We look back on the past and we read things like, they were meeting together every day and they were holding all things in common. And we read these things and we're like, well, that was nice for them. They were really,
Right.
that was a
What
specific
spiritual
time.
people?
Yeah, that was a specific time in the church. And, they were just superheroes of the faith or whatever. We don't
Mhm.
think it has any application to us. We don't think that we should be living that way. In fact, we want fewer demands on our time. And if
Yeah.
people push us like, hey, you should be at Bible study and you might have to make sacrifices to do that. It
Yeah.
might be hard. I mean, I remember when Oswin was really little and Emmanuel would work late at night and I would have to go to Bible study by myself. And I was always just like, oh, this is like, sorry, but there were a lot of times that I just felt like, man, this is like such a production to get here.
Yeah.
And once I was there, I was happy that I went. But
Yeah.
then, I would go home after and I'm like, oh, it's so late. And, I could have been doing something else with this time because that's the selfishness in us where we just, we desire our own things and we will make a lot of excuses to do it. And we have to fight that.
Well, I mean, it's the old saying is, of course, like when you want to do something, you have a million reasons why you should and can.
Mhm.
When you don't want to do something, you have a million reasons why you can't.
Yeah.
And so, it's harder for us in the city, but obviously they had ancient cities as well. It's easier for like a town that's like a
Yeah.
Christian town, for instance, or whatever, because you see each other every day. You're living with
Like
one
Moscow?
another. well, so you live with one another, but it is true that like the early church understood that when you have a church, you have a little town that you've made within the city.
Yeah.
So you are a little town now. In terms of these are the people you're going to do life with. This is your family. You should always be around them as much as you can be and to help them and they can help you and all that sort of thing. But church, again, with this individualistic notion that has just plagued us, church now is just the place where I go to get my fill from God. And then I can go out and, deal with my week and be on my own for the week. And then I'll come back and do it. And maybe I'll meet some friends there. That's great. But it's really not an understanding that the church is the body of Jesus. So this is what is actually the body through unification. And so the church is Jesus. And the more you fellowship with the church, the more you're fellowshipping with Jesus. And apart from the church, you really don't have fellowship with Jesus. You're either a part of it or you're not. And you're either being transformed by it or you're not. And it's a community that you're joining, not just a club where you're a member and you go and, it reminds me of people who you've got two different kinds of golf going on a golf course, right? You've got a group of people playing golf on the holes. And then you have the individuals who are just like driving at the driving range. And it's like, that's what most people think church is. It's the driving range. You just go by yourself and you can get what you want out of it. Whereas I would be like, no, church is actually, you're playing holes with 5 guys or 5 people or whatever it may be.
Let me piggyback on what you just said, because this is the final piece of the Eucharistic puzzle that helped me really bridge the gap between what Craig is saying and what Ortlund is saying. And I think, not saying I'm in the middle of those, but I think this could, if Gavin's watching, dare I say, this could help him. But it is this idea, you brought up this unification idea.
Yeah.
Understanding, like, when we think about the real presence of Christ, I can affirm that. I can truly say there is a real presence of Christ. And before I go into the explanation, let me just read John 16:5. I did not tell you these things from the beginning because I was with you. He's talking to his disciples. But now I am going to the one who sent me. And not one of you is asking me, where are you going? Instead, your hearts are filled with sadness because I have said these things to you. But I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I am going away. For if I do not go away, the advocate will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And when he comes, he will prove the world wrong concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Concerning sin, because they do not believe in me, and concerning righteousness, because I am going to the Father, and you will see me no longer. And concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world has been condemned. I have many more things to say to you, but cannot bear them now. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you in all truth. For he will not speak on his own authority, but he will speak wherever he hears, and will tell you what is to come. He will glorify me, because he will receive me from what is mine, and will tell it to you. Everything that the Father has is mine. This is important right here. 15. Everything that the Father has is mine. That is why I said the Spirit will receive from me what is mine and will tell it to you. In a little while, you will see me no longer. And after a while, you will see me. So right there, it is, how are you going to see me when you can't see me? How are you going to have what is of me when I am not here to give it to you? It's going to be the one that has all of me already. Just like you have all of the Father, if you have me, you have all of me if you have the Spirit that I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
And what I want to say is, like, the real presence of Christ is in the Spirit that indwells in every single believer that gathers together. So I can truly say, like, to Gavin's point, here's where the mysticism fog dissipates. In the clarity of the horizon, you can see land ho, is this verse. It is that indwelling that unifies us. And the fancy theological term is theosis. It is the deification of every single person that the Spirit indwells, because they're connected to the God-man, and he's actually there in the people.
Yeah.
But people, we're so, I don't know.
Not to the bread?
Not to the bread? Yeah, right? Like, whoa, but that sounds like self-indulgent. You're saying we're gods. That's not like, I thought the Mormons believed they were gods. I thought no, we're not supposed to be like a god. We're sinners. We're worthless, right? We're the ones getting the scraps from the master's table. It's like, no. You don't understand what Christ has purchased then. Like, he's purchased not just salvation, not just that you don't die, but he's actually connected you to himself, and you receive a lot more than just land and beautiful trees and water that's not going to kill you, and alligators on. It's like, no, it is eternal life. That is what you have, and that is deification. But in that is, like, for me, I was like, there's the real presence of Christ.
Yeah.
where I can refute the memorialists that get Zwingli wrong. And maybe Zwingli meant that in the end. I don't know.
I think he did.
Okay, I hope so. But to Gavin, I want to say, like, get rid of, I'm sorry, Calvin's wrong. Calvin just goes in a weird direction with it.
Yeah.
And it's not that kind of mysticism. That's as mystical as transubstantiation is.
Yeah, that's speculative mysticism rather than biblical, biblical mystical connection.
Yeah.
Again, one we have revelation on, and one we don't.
16:5 is it for me.
Yeah,
like that is, and that's true until Christ returns. That's not just true for the apostles. It's through their teaching that we're going to receive it, because he says that later in the high priestly prayer. But we're all partaking that way. So,
yeah. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Jerk?
No.
Yeah, you have such
don't
weird movies.
watch it. It's not great. But there's this part where, so he's like a complete idiot, right? And he's working at a gas station, and this guy just decides he's gonna, like, randomly try to kill people. So he's like a sniper. So he starts shooting, and the gas station, of course, has tons of oil cans, like, all stacked up. It's like an old-time gas station or whatever. So there's oil cans, like, stacked up everywhere or whatever. And he fires and he misses them, and he hits an oil can. And then he suddenly realized someone's shooting, and so he hides behind these oil cans. And so because he's hiding behind oil cans, the guy hits more oil cans. He's like, it's these cans. He hates these cans. And then he goes and hides, and he's like, and he hits more cans, like, oh no, more cans. And he doesn't realize that, like, the aim of the guy is at him, not the cans. And it reminds me of the whole thing to where, like, we're all talking about Jesus being really present with bread.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
like
you're
the
missing-
aim
yeah.
of Jesus is he's not saving bread. He's not becoming one with bread.
Yeah.
It's the people. So if you want to say that he's bodily present with us, yeah, amen, he is, because in our unification with him through the Spirit, we also have become one body with him. Then that's why our bodies will be redeemed. That's the whole point. But that's where the real presence is, as you were just saying, and it reminded me of that, because it's just sort of like adventures in missing the point when we're all just arguing over Jesus being in the bread, when Jesus is like, no, he who receives you receives me. He who receives me receives him who sent me. There's a link there to where I'm connected to you. I'm not connected to the bread.
What happens to the idiot?
Oh, he gets out of it because he.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Steve Martin.
Okay, I was like,
Oh,
is this a comedy or some like
yeah,
really?
no, it's a comedy. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, if you got anything out of this episode, I guess it's a movie, a not movie recommendation.
Yeah.
That
Do not watch it though, because
they're always not. Those become the recommendations, right?
Well, I saw the TV version when I was younger, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I love this movie." So I watched the actual version. I was like, "Oh yeah, no."
this is the problem with so many movies I saw when I was a kid.
Yeah,
It's like
They weren't that bad
Groundhog
when we were young,
Day
right?
and Trading Places. Like you see these on TV,
Right.
you do
Yeah.
not realize like these have nudity in them.
These are
yeah,
awful.
Yeah. Well, because everything was
Movies.
when we were kids. I don't think they even do it anymore, because who watches regular TV? But it used to be you could see almost any movie on TV because they edited it for you for TV, and they took out all the words and they took out all the nudity and all anything explicitly violent or whatever. And so you grow up with these movies thinking, "Oh, that's a great movie." And then you watch it again with the unedited version because that's all you can get now. And it's like, whoa, that was, not even to talk about when you're a kid, you don't have the context of thinking of like, when Grease Lightning is talking about Grease Lightning, you think they're just talking about a car and it's like nothing else or whatever. And you don't realize what it's actually, and you don't get the explicit language in the TV version of that song. So you think you're like, Grease Lightning. And you're just like not even realizing what it's about. And it's just sort of like now going back and watching those movies, you're just kind of like, man, we should have a whole episode on that. Just talk about
That's
how.
why VidAngel should sponsor us.
Yeah, there you go.
Man, that's 3. We'll have Zevia.
Except for VidAngel like cuts out like too much of the movie is the problem.
You can cut out. You can tailor it, because VidAngel, you actually go through the settings and you choose every single setting of what you want it to take out.
So we did that, but so here's the problem. The problem is the movie, right? So because ultimately,
Yeah, it's not VidAngel's fault that the movie is garbage.
Totally
So we did it with Goonies.
Oh yeah,
well,
because
it
Goonies
takes out
is
like half
filled
the
with
movie.
profanity.
Yeah, it takes out half the movie because they're cursing the entire time.
Yeah,
which I
so
get
maybe
it.
don't watch
that's what
Goonies.
kids sound like at that age, when you're in a. But ultimately, it's
when
and
you're,
again,
in
it's something
a
you don't
little
notice as a
pagan
kid
gang.
All right.
Yeah, and they also have a feature that you can take Jar Jar out of Star Wars.
Oh man,
on VidAngel.
Watch.
That's VidAngel. Okay.
Yeah,
that is
VidAngel
awesome.
has a feature that you can do that.
I'm gonna buy it just for that.
Producer, send an email asking if they need any.
He's not here right now, by the way. He had to go to work.
Oh, all right.
So he actually is not really present at the moment.
He's not. There's not even a picture of him.
Well, he's not physically present, but he's here with us in spirit.
Well, you got to go up to Christ and then back down to him, and then that's how you're connected.
It's like a satellite.
Yes, it's Starlink. All right. So, anything else you want to expand on?
No, I think it was good. I think we covered. I mean, obviously, I think the individualism and the way you view communion then spills over to people not letting their kids partake in it. And
yeah,
we've had that I mean, you may have questions with like the examine yourselves, and I think that in this context, maybe that would give people something to think about in the way they treat one another.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do. I know we did like, should you leave a church if they use or participate in pedo communion? But maybe we can do an episode on what is that verse actually saying. I'll just
and we did talk about it, I think, didn't we?
Maybe
in that one.
I don't remember.
We did, but I think it was in relation to children though. I would just like, imagine if people had the right view of communion.
Oh man.
And then they are going to go partake of it when they've defrauded their brother in some way, or they've caused division, or it's like, again, you have to have a false view of communion in order to do that.
Maybe this is a stupid example, but I would notice sometimes it doesn't happen anymore. I don't want to make everything before the split.
But now
I would
everything's
know
fantastic.
Back in Egypt.
back in Egypt. But you would sometimes have, you would have like a potluck or, fellowship meal, whatever you want to call it. And you would have people who would just they would just take everything of whatever one particular food was.
Yeah.
And they would just leave none for anyone else.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, that's kind of getting at this a little bit.
Yeah.
It's a silly example, but it's like, maybe think about the other people around you.
Well, because again, people don't even think of that as communion, which is why it's like they end up doing what the Corinthians were doing, because they're not on guard because they think it's not communion, but it really is.
Here's what shook this to like my core, where I had to like rethink a lot of this. It was it was back in Egypt, and we had a fellowship meal, and there was food, free flowing food.
Not the melons.
Yeah, there were leeks, onions, and beer and wine, and no one was watching out for one another. Yep, and somebody got really drunk, really drunk, to the point we thought like they were like dying.
Wow.
And we were trying to figure out if it was like a medicine this person was on. But at the end of the day, he got drunk. And I was there at this fellowship meal. And I remember thinking like, okay, I just knew in my core, like, this is a fellowship meal. This isn't communion. This is not a church function. This is just after the church.
Yeah.
And everyone's just coming to their house. Like, no, somebody got drunk at communion. That's what happened.
Well, that's not a one-off. I think people have gotten drunk multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, Emmanuel and I had left when there were times when we would walk out and we would be like, "Oh, hey," like, talking to people, and we're like, "You've clearly had too much to drink, so now it's time for us to leave."
Yeah. I remember saying to the host one time, because he was like, he was rambling on. It was very clear that he had way too much to drink, and he's all, maybe that's just the spirit speaking. And I said, or spirits.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, like, it has happened more than once. And the problem is just that, this is after church.
It doesn't count.
It's like, what would happen if like nothing is after church? If church is just continual? Then maybe we'd act a little better with one another. Again, if we were a community rather than a club, because there is after hours from a club.
Oh yeah. Well, the saddest part is, and these guys knew better, but I think they threw it back on the elders, and they said, well, once the elders, make a proclamation or decree that this is part of communion, then we're not going to view it that way or something. I was like, okay.
Wow. Amazing that they're under such authority when it comes to rituals like that we didn't care about. But when it comes to like, splitting a church, going off in rebellion, then our decrees didn't matter. Church
well, those are existential. Those are existential threats, Brian. No holds barred if it's existential. Okay.
I mean, I obey God when he tells me like to take the garbage out, but not thou shalt not murder. That
I mean, the guy
Priorities.
was really annoying. Trash, at least I can throw away.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier.
Trash is going to talk back to me.
The other guy's really bugging me.
All right. Okay. Well, man, hour 40. Lots to think about. Lots to comment on. Maybe. Yeah. This is going to ruffle some feathers, but this is the biblical view. And again, this is also the church father view in connection with their liturgical practices. You can't avoid that either. All right. Next week, we'll talk about something exciting once again. Thanks for watching. Hit the like, hit the dislike, subscribe. we're hoping to get 150. We've been 149 for like a month. So let's get 150. Be that
Big goals we
150th
have.
person.
Yeah.
Huh?
Everybody's like, I'm celebrating a
goals.
million followers.
Yeah, I know, right?
We're
They
like, we
don't
just want
send a plaque
150.
out. YouTube doesn't send a plaque for 150. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I know. Such
on.
a mile marker.
They'll give you a thumbs down for 150. That's what they'll give you. If you really want to support us, we got a Patreon. You can join there. You can watch our ID offer talks. We should call it that. ID offer talks. Things that don't matter. Well, we talk about books like the
Matter
Christian,
a little bit.
Yeah, Christian, just
we
more.
We put meaning into them.
Yeah, we put meaning into every aspect of life. But those are behind a paywall. We never put theology behind a paywall. And we never will. Like things
Just
that you
silliness.
Just silliness, and just why Revenge of the Sith is awful is behind a paywall. So if you want to know why, go ahead and pay for it. But until next time, thanks for watching. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Bye.